very much, and it's very good to be back in Delhi. जब मैं दिल्ली में हूँ, मैं बहुत खुश हूँ, क्योंकि मैं दिल्ली में रहता था 90s में. मैं student JNU में, and my older daughter was born in Delhi. So we heard from the Chief Minister a short while ago about Delhi's innovation, about public sector innovation, about India's technology and what's being done with that. And let me give one practical example of that, which is my daughter's birth certificate in India took 10 minutes to arrive. This isn't bureaucracy, this is service delivery at pace. But what I'm going to be talking about today is anticipatory policymaking. So in the theme of NXT, in the theme of Next, how do we make sure that we bring the future into policymaking? How do we make sure we bring decisions about tomorrow into meetings we're holding today? And I'll start, if I may, with a Norwegian word, tidsklemme. And this word is used for parents of under 5-year-olds. You're feeling busy, you're feeling stressed, you don't have time to think. Jalti jalti hai. This sense of urgency that comes in. And I would argue that anybody who's in a senior political or senior business role is in a permanent phase of tidsklemme. You're always feeling stressed. There's never enough time. There's a WhatsApp, there's a signal, there's a phone call, there's meetings, there's people who want to take your time and spend time with you. So the question I would have is how do we make sure that we're building time to think about some of these issues around the future? And it turns out that each of us has a personalized time zone. It's not just whether you are in India or in the UK or in Japan. Each of us have a time zone that's framed by when were we born? How old are we? How do we perceive the past? What's the biography that's led us to the role we're in today? And that time zone shapes our level of optimism or pessimism about the future, and it shapes often the quality of our decision making as well. The good news is we spend lots of our time thinking about the future, but usually it's, when is this man going to stop speaking? What's for lunch? What am I doing on Sunday? Yeah? It's not necessarily thinking about where will I be in 10 years' time? How do I make good plans for my city, my country, or my business? Now, it turns out that surprise is not new. We've all experienced a surprise, good surprises, bad surprises. But it turns out it's very difficult to prepare for surprise. And I love old documents, Purana documents. Here is an old document, a declassified CIA document from 1982, about how difficult it is to prepare government for surprise. How do you actually train to recognize that surprise is part of what you're going to experience? So the purpose of my talk today is effectively, how do you escape your personal time zone? How do you escape that time squeeze so that you can think a bit more about the future? And a bit of that reflects the reality that surprise is always around us. My friend Ricardo Luna, who was Peru's foreign minister a few years ago, he was also a professor at Princeton and a variety of other universities, came up with what he calls the Luna Law. And it's the iron law of proliferating unintended consequences. The fact that no matter how much you prepare, you're getting ready for that drive to Gurgaon or getting ready to go down on the metro to AeroCity, and something will happen, some surprise will happen, it will take longer, maybe there's been a crash, maybe there's a delay, maybe you forgot your phone. whatever reason. So Ricardo Luna calls this the iron law of proliferating unintended consequences. Now, sometimes those unintended consequences can be excellent. And India's been at the heart of some of those positive surprises. The Green Revolution was not expected, but it transformed food security in the 1960s and the 1970s. Global trade and commerce transformed development and economic growth across the world in the 1980s and beyond. And India was a vital part of that, in particular in the 1990s and ever since. The internet transformed commerce, life, information. And again, it wasn't anticipated. The scale of the impact of the internet wasn't anticipated. And of course, we're now seeing AI transforming the very world we're living in right now. But unintended consequences are difficult to prepare for, as we're seeing with the war in the Middle East right now. Nobody, I think, would have anticipated 2 months ago that we would be facing an oil and gas price shock and fundamental questions about what happens next in the Middle East. Nobody would have thought that we'd have 15 lakh people who have found themselves stuck in the Middle East because of the impact on transit and air travel. So what can be done? What's the positive story around some of this? And I teach anticipatory policymaking at the London School of Economics. I also teach on geopolitics and technology. I think there are some things that can be done that will help with this. Some of it is around making the time for long-term thinking and long-term policy making. Switching off, disconnecting, taking that hour either individually or as a collective to think about what might happen in 10 years' time, what might happen in 5 years' time, the different scenarios about what is plausible and possible, but also plausible even if it's unlikely. There are lots of exercises you can do: red teaming, challenging, exercising, running simulations and exercises to see what that world might look like for your business or for your government. And challenging what I call extrapolitis, the most infectious disease of all, which is a way that we think that tomorrow is going to be just like today, but just a little bit different. Extrapolitis. So how do we create a medicine to protect us against extrapolitis? And institutional responses can help. A policy planning unit in a foreign ministry. A policy planning unit in a prime minister's office. Think about Niti Aayog and the role that's played in India. But finally, I would argue also opening up bureaucracy. I spent over 20 years as a bureaucrat in the British Foreign Service. I've served as a diplomat in a number of countries, including in India. I served as an advisor to our Prime Minister in 10 Downing Street. But one of the biggest challenges of the bureaucracy is it tends to be a vertical. If you live in the bureaucracy, you don't necessarily have experience to draw from business or from the world beyond. And if we really want to challenge extrapolitis, to challenge the lack of imagination in thinking about the future, I would argue the one thing we can do is encourage more movement in and out of government, and more connectivity in and out of government, including at the senior level. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is, if we do want to spend more time thinking about what's next, as the theme of this summit is all about, we need to also work out ways to spend time in thinking about the future. We also need to find ways of institutionalizing that in business and in government. And remember, we can't escape the time pressures we're under today, but we can adjust the way in which we operate individually and collectively to adapt to that. Thank you again to the organizers for bringing me back to Delhi. When I'm in this city, I'm so happy to be back. And thank you too for this amazing summit dedicated to thinking about now and next.